May suffering, may the suffering be few. By means of these meritorious deeds, may I never join with the foolish. May I join always with the wise until the time I attain Nibbana. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings be. From the highest realm of existence to the lowest, may all beings arisen in these realms, with form and without form, with perception and without perception, be released from all suffering and attain to perfect peace. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Friends, let us spend few minutes on the Dhamma talk. I want to continue our talks on the factors of enlightenment. All 37 factors of enlightenment gain their power through repeated practice. If we practice only once, they don't become very powerful. It builds upon moments in which you express the factors separately to build them together into a state that expresses them all. Suppose there are 37 mountains, peaks in the ridges, and they merge into 7 major mountains. Their peaks are in the clouds. A fine drizzles is falling constantly. The tiny drops of water are showering down gently nearly all the time. Occasionally it rains harder. Drops are continuously accumulating. Each drop of this tiny rainy moment, when one of them, the other 7 factors, dominates your mind. We all have fleeting flashes of things like mindfulness, concentration, and total certainty that what we are doing inside to build up our insight. This is the state of scattered mind. The factors you want to be unified and occurring in rare fits and starts. These tiny mind moments, droplets seep into the ground, percolate through the soil, and are purified. Harmful elements are filtered out, and healthy minerals percolates in. The drops flow together, merge and surface as tiny springs. The springs create rivulets that flows together into streams. The streams flow together into creeks. This process continues and the water is rushing down the mountain, singing as it goes over rocks and crashing. As it plunges into waterfalls, every drop is laden with potential of 37 factors accumulated within it. Eventually, they form a mighty river, huge river, like the Mississippi or the Nile or the Ganges. But the power of this river is harnessed. Someone has been very clever and dammed the river where it flows through a gorge. It forms an enormous lake, a lake big like Lake Superior or the Caspian Sea. The lake contains all the power of all the droplets that fell on the mountains, stored as potential energy in the weight of the water. Innumerable tons of water are pressing against the dam, trying to release their power. Your mind is still scattered, but less so. The factors have gained great potential power through being unified, but the power has not yet sufficiently concentrated to create the effect you want. Someone has been even cleverer. They have put holes in the dam, small holes. Compared to the huge volume of water trying to pour through them. The water gushes with enormous force as it squeezes its way through those holes, turning its potential energy into the kinetic energy of movement. Now your mind is no longer scattered. The factors have been unified to release their power. Their power is now concentrated into what is called Samadhi Bala. Samadhi Bala. The power of concentration. Assume that there are turbines mounted in the path of the raging flow. They spin huge generators which converts the kinetic energy into electric energy enough to power the light to light Canada or a whole section of Europe. The concentrated power flows through electric lines to light bulbs in cities and homes. It is the bright flame of mindfulness that reveals the luminous nature of our minds. With this much power behind it, mindfulness blazes through the accumulated dirt of lifetimes and produces liberation. Concentration has accumulated tiny mind moments in which the 37 factors express themselves singly into a state which they are all present together constantly. When you practice 7, all 37 come together. I mentioned these 7 last time. When you practice those 7, all 37 come together, come themselves together into a state in which they are all present together and constantly. When you practice 7, all 37 comes together in your mind at one time. To achieve this, your practice must be very powerful. That is samadhi bala. That's a really, really powerful. Liberation is powered by concentration, and it takes a lot of it to do the job. It all starts with that tiny little drizzling. That is tiny little practice. Every moment you practice concentration, first mindfulness factor of enlightenment. Every moment you practice mindfulness, how little it may, that goes to the mindfulness basket, mindfulness factor of enlightenment. It starts in a very tiny little, like a drizzling, every tiny mind moment and moment by moment. They accumulate and bring wonderful, powerful results. That is the power we have in our mind. Our mind, as long as it is scattered, like water, when they are scattered, when the water is scattered, although it has so much power, it cannot produce powerful results like turning turbines once concentrated. The clouds and the droplets had no power by themselves. It is concentrated that makes it all work to bring the power. Once you gain jnana concentration, you can use it to perform miracles in your mind. That is why it is said when you gain concentration, you have 4 4 possibilities. One is called Dittha Dhamma Sukha Vihara, living happily in this very life. is one. Second, you gain jnana darsana. Jnana darsana means you gain vision and knowledge to develop special knowledge, vision, jnana, like seeing the previous lives of yours and the life of others passing away and taking rebirth according to their karma, or you can perform various kind of miracles like appearing in one place and disappearing in one place and appearing in another place, reading others' thoughts, and so forth. The third power, the benefit of gaining this kind of concentration is that you develop it to be born in Brahma realms. Fourth is that you can destroy defilements, all defilements. That's called asavake jnana. When we gain concentration, we can use that concentration to destroy all asava. Asava means influxes or fermentations. We have built up a lot of fermentations in our mind, like toxic. We have brewed defilements throughout in our samsara, and we can destroy all of them when we gain concentration. But when the mind is scattered, not concentrated, that unconcentrated or scattered, unfocused mind cannot do that. And therefore, once you gain jhanic concentration, you can use it to perform miracles in your mind. We can only imagine this because our minds are scattered. The 37 factors expresses themselves in our consciousness from time to time, but they do not have the necessary power to transform the mind. They must be gathered in tight together through concentration. So the mindfulness concentration work hand in hand. These are not two separate entities. And that is why we have in the factors of enlightenment, number one as mindfulness factor of enlightenment. So they work hand in hand throughout the entire process, both as we are building and strengthening these factors And when they come together for the final fusion in Nibbana, each of these states is directly or indirectly connected with jhanas. We will look closely at most of them later because I'm going to give series of talks on this topic. And but first, let's look at why they are important. As we practice these factors, we develop concentration. In fact, each time we do anything wholesome, we have a certain amount of concentration. Anything wholesome. We don't label this as jhana, but there is concentration. Jhana is a prolonged period of doing nothing else. These are just a moment of normal consciousness in which one or another of the factors dominate the mind. We want to identify this little moment of concentration and diligently train ourselves to notice them as they take place. That way, we condition ourselves to know these things called concentration and eventually attain jhana. Jhana is prolonged of this little moment of concentration we are already practicing at any time we do wholesome things. All these things are called factors because they are tiny little moments we build up, and when they come together we give a name. Factor of enlightenment, tiny little moment becomes factors. Yet there is a separate group called 7 factors of enlightenment, which we discussed earlier, mentioned in my, I think, the first talk. These groups contains all the others. When you are practicing 7 factors of awakening, you are actually automatically practicing all the 37 factors of enlightenment. They are grouped. The first factor of enlightenment is mindfulness, and mindfulness factor of enlightenment is named separately and called 4 foundations of mindfulness. And what we are practicing in the 4 foundations of mindfulness is mindfulness factor of enlightenment. Even though they are grouped separately, but the practice is factor of enlightenment. You need mindfulness to build up your momentum. But what is the proper domain for your mindfulness? What is your frame of reference in meditation? What do you concentrate on? All these things are discussed in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. You can build up a necessary spiritual momentum through the concentration or just anything. Just anything. You must use certain specific subject in your meditation. They must be beings promote. Definitely, it must be practiced with dispassion. Dispassion is observation and revealing the truth of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness. Those objects or factors are described in the same discourse word called Satipatthana. Satipatthana means establishing mindfulness. Patthana means establishment of mindfulness. When using each object, you must remain ardent, alert, mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. The world here doesn't mean anything outside. The world here is, in the Buddha's teaching, the world within. There is a discourse in Samyutta Nikaya where Buddha said in Arya Suvinaye, the noble soul discipline, that is in the Buddha's dispensation, Loka is this one-fathomed body with its consciousness. There is a discourse called Rohitasa Sutta. Rohitasa Sutta. Rohita asked the Buddha whether by traveling one can find the end of the world. Buddha said, by traveling you cannot find the end of the world. Also Buddha at the same time said, however, without finding the end of world, you cannot end suffering. These two statements sound contradicting. Clarifying this contradiction, Buddha said, this one-fathomed body with consciousness, I do declare the world, origin of the world, end of the world, and the path leading to the end of the world. That means this one-fathom body, each person is one fathom long or high. Fathom is, according to measurements, 6 feet. Some of us are not 6 feet. I'm not 6 feet. Fathom is when you stretch your hands from middle tip of middle finger to the tip of middle finger or the other hand. That distance is called one fathom. So each person is one fathom in his or her own measurement. Within this, we have the world. What is this world made up of? The same elements that the rest of the world is made up of. And therefore, Buddha said, without knowing this world, without understanding this world, we cannot end suffering. It is for understanding this world we practice mindfulness and factors of enlightenment 7 or 37. And therefore, this is in 4 foundations of mindfulness. Buddha explained this world and he said overcoming, putting aside greed, distress with reference to this world. We have greed for this world, that is, we have greed for this body, feeling, perception, thought, and consciousness. All confusions we have with regard to these 5. And once we understood them, understood the origin of them, and how to end this, and how to find the path leading to the end of this, that is the purpose of this practice of factors of enlightenment. Friends, I cannot go beyond this in my talk. That's all I can mention within this short period. And I want to end this little talk today. And also